Hey, let us begin the program.
For Thursday, July 15th, 2021. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello and welcome to the podcast this week. 2 weeks in a row. I feel so lucky that I'm joined by great friends, familiar faces. We got some really nice notes on social media after last week's recording. People just like hearing the three of us talk about stuff. I guess that's why we have a podcast. Jeremy Williams, nice t-shirt. How you doing this morning?
I'm great, man. I found out that the video game that I made with my friends over at Other Ocean, Space Jam: New Legacy, the video game, it was played by people at the premiere a few days ago.
Wow, they had it
Yeah,
set up
What?
on Xboxes?
I guess we weren't invited to said premiere, but it's just cool. Like I had no idea, and so it's
Wait,
like,
when you say people, would those people include like a LeBron James or a Bugs Bunny? I don't know who else would be at a Space Jam premiere.
yeah, exactly. Well, Porky
Tweety
Pig,
Bird.
yeah, Tasmanian Devil,
Do you think they would
Roadrunner.
play themselves? Are they the type of characters now that you're familiar with their movements and their sound bites in making this game?
Yeah, few people are as familiar with these people as me and the
Like,
filmmakers and my cohorts. It was fun. It was fun. That was just fun. A little bit of information. It's like your game's out there being played by people you may have heard of.
yes,
So that's cool. That's cool.
that's awesome. Awesome. Kishore, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. Can I do one quick PSA? It's a little bit of bummer, but it's just we're seeing a rapid rise in Delta cases in the US. So everyone should take care of themselves. If you're not fully vaccinated, this is a moment to really consider that. If you are fully vaccinated, this is a moment to consider talking to friends and loved ones that may not be fully vaccinated about why it's so important, because we know 99% of people that are showing up in hospitals are not fully vaccinated right now. So take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, do what you can to help.
I
That's
mean,
it.
I think my assumption is a large majority of the people listening to this podcast are probably like-minded or share, our belief in the vaccines and the COVID vaccine specifically. But maybe they have family members or friends. I think we've heard it surprisingly, people we know in our orbits that have friends or loved ones who are hesitant still. What is advice you can give to listeners about how to have conversations with those friends? Just maybe not even specific, lines of engagement they can use, but just tone and attitude, like what works.
Yeah, so there's a lot of resources out there, but the basics are you have to acknowledge what their concerns are first. So listen first, and understand what their concerns about the vaccine are and validate them, because more often than not, those concerns really make sense in the context of their life, whether it's about the speed of development or distrust of like the healthcare system, or feeling like COVID isn't a big deal where they live. It's understandable when you really listen and relate to people. Two is, don't enter the conversation trying to convince them or persuade them to get a vaccine. What you're really trying to do is relate to them why the vaccine has been meaningful to you. And in so doing, they can kind of get an understanding of how maybe the vaccine could be helpful to them. But if your goal is simply just to relate your experience, they're more likely to be open to you. And then lastly, if they're curious about the vaccine, follow up with like a good information sources where they can learn more, because there is a lot of information out there, and there's a few sort of reputable sites that you could really point to that speak to plain English, and maybe I'll put links in the YouTube comments for people to share. But mostly have conversations with friends and family that you love that may not be vaccinated, and just really be empathetic about it.
And I would think that, some of that hesitancy, if it's on a good faith effort for them, right? It's based on, their understanding of how vaccines work, which is, grounded on a factual conversation that you can have. And you would hope to separate those conversations from, you know, identity politics or anything that's surrounded about how the vaccine or even COVID, right? This is purely a singular thing that you can have a full factual conversation about without it bleeding into the other aspects that make it more contentious.
Yeah, that's why you have to start by just acknowledging where they are, what they feel about the vaccine and their perspective. Because without that, there's no sort of grounding for any sort of open discussion
Mm,
about the whole thing.
mm.
All that being said, uh, I still am not panicked about this fall. I just think this is a moment for people to take care of themselves.
Before we dive into the general news section, which we're going to talk about technology and pop culture, I do have an aside that is, I promise, technology tangentially related. In this household, we've watched a lot of sports this past couple weeks. And I'll tell you, especially this week, we went from watching zero baseball to a lot of baseball. And for one reason or another, my wife has become an expert on baseball this week. In because there's notable talent that's shaking up the baseball world in Shohei Ohtani. But watching sports, whether it's baseball or basketball, I think we talked about this before. The way they're filming these and broadcasting this stuff, it's a gripe. It's bugging me, and if there was a segment about things that annoy me, I'll tell you the thing that annoys me the most right now in watching broadcast television and broadcast sports is the overuse of full frame DSLR footage for crowd shots and athlete interviews. That shallow depth of field, just like Kishore has right
Yeah, I
now.
turned it
That
on
is
just for this segment.
that is unnecessary and gratuitous, and I believe the production teams should not let the influence of maybe video games and the way sports have been portrayed in video games influence how they broadcast, because it is inconsistent with broadcast cameras that they've used traditionally, and I don't think it brings anything aside from a "ooh, that looks different" factor to watching television.
I'd be curious to hear from actual sports fans to hear if this is an actual problem.
I bet
Um,
their reaction is, "Ooh, it looks different and new. It looks expensive." And I'll say there, like, for example, watching an opening ceremony for NBA Finals game, when the lights go down and they're singing the national anthem or some opening ceremony thing. Yeah, the low light attributes of having a full frame camera, you can see more detail. It looks less grainy, and that makes sense. But to flip that aperture wide open, have him to really look like these athletes and interviewers are standing in front of green screens, it is jarring. The shutter is wrong. It doesn't look like broadcast. It looks like someone took a DSLR and filmed it. And then to mix that and blend that with your standard, jib cam and your big broadcast cameras, which when you're watching sports, you want good frame rate. There are things that you want. You want wider depth of field. You don't want a shallow depth of field because you want to see the action going on. It is bugging the hell out of me.
Well, so two things. So today, I believe there, or no, it was yesterday, was the final day of NTSC transmissions in the US. So,
what?
like,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
it was postponed for many years. So I think, I mean, most of the stations had sort of powered off. So I think your sort of commentary about the way things look is funny in that context. The second is with the Olympics coming and no fans going to be there, I bet you're going to get a whole lot of these shots. But I actually kind of understand them in the Olympic context when you don't have people there, you don't have a background, and they're going to blur things to make it look more filled than it normally would be. And I think they'll be backfill the sound. Just get used to them experimenting in the coming Olympics. I don't mind it because they use these mostly in non non-competitive times. So it's not like bottom of the ninth, two out. You're watching like a bokeh shot of the pitcher winding up. It's really like in the home run derby they use this. So I'm fine with it. It's experimenting for to find what could work in these new digital transmissions.
Uh, where it feels like we're in an interim phase with maybe a shift in the camera technology or a widening of what's acceptable for broadcast standards. And in this interim phase, it seems like they're picking cameras off the shelves. Like they're high quality, high end cameras, but they are prosumer cameras that they're outfitting for broadcast. And there's some mobility advantages. Like you see, the camera operators on the field with very lightweight setups. You can get right into a huddle, right, for football. But to me, it looks like the cheats that video game developers have been using forever to do things like not have to render as much in the background. In this case, to not have to show a stadium that's empty. But when we're talking about the home run derby, it is a stadium full of people. When you're talking about the NBA finals, it is an arena full of people. So I think it's necessary. I think there's still a learning curve, and in this time right now, that's when I'm going to make my argument. So let's hold back or be more tempered in the usage of it and not just wide open aperture. That just bugs the hell out of me. Anyway, moving on. First acknowledgement: Loki finale has aired on Disney Plus. By the time you're listening to this, and certainly by the time as we're recording this, none of us have watched it yet, but we will plan to watch it and maybe discuss it in a later episode. So please be warned, if you haven't seen it, to maybe stay off social media. Don't read the comments, because I'm staying away from the comments at least today until I can find time to watch the episode. But hot on the heels of Loki wrapping up, we have a bunch of things coming in the Disney universe as well as other streaming services. First, Disney, we have the first trailer of the new and next Pixar film, and it's Turning Red, from the same director as Bao. And if you haven't seen this trailer, it is about a young girl, May, who is, I think it looks like, in middle school in Toronto, Canada. It's a very short trailer, opens up with doing work in the classroom, and then her mother is maybe infringing on her personal space at school. It's something that maybe we could all relate to growing up, the embarrassment of your parents. And in that embarrassment, she turns into a giant red panda, almost hulkifies, and then shenanigans ensue. I thought the trailer was adorable. It looked very pastel-y in terms of the aesthetics, and not in the same way that maybe Mitchell's versus the Machines, but there was definitely a softer tone to it, and almost again like Luca, leading into Studio Ghibli in the Miyazaki way of doing things, which is very different than kind of the aggressive animation styles of like Sony Animation Studios.
I thought it was great, and I thought I didn't expect quite as much from what I read as a teaser trailer. It's a 2-minute trailer. It's got me hooked. I don't need anything more. I want to see this movie, and I like that it was basically one scene. A lot of trailers they try to, and maybe this is the difference between a teaser and a full fledged trailer. They try to throw you a synopsis of the whole film. They want to capture everybody's attention and hook everybody in any possible way. But this was a single concise scene where you kind of get the premise, and you're like you said, it's an adorable version of the Incredible Hulk, and sign me up. I can't believe I haven't shown this to my daughter yet. I can't wait to share this with her.
I, so I fully acknowledge this looks good. I'm a little nervous about this. I mean, the crux of this movie is about anxiety. And coming off this last year, is that what kids are going to want to engage with, where they've had to deal with this, every day? It's a universal feeling, but the timing of this may or may not sort of work for the moment. It could either be perfect or just completely off.
Hmm.
The director is Dome Shi or Domi Shi. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but I love what she did with Bao in that short film, with turning a metaphor. The whole short film was a metaphorical relationship between parent and child, and this seems to extend on that. Like that film really resonated. The short film really resonated with me, and just from this 2-minute snippet of Turning Red, like it's about big emotions that kids feel, right? Like in the same way that Inside Out is about how these fantastical manifestations of emotions of children. I think that's one of the reasons that Pixar films resonate with adults and kids, because we all had these big emotions. That's, I feel like they've carved out this nice storytelling niche for themselves in making these timeless stories, because they are so universally resonant in a different way than the Sony movies. And like, I think we've all kind of hoped that Pixar will expand beyond that at some point, but I'm happy for them to stay in these universal themes because they do it so well. But there's some good competition out there also. Um, Next up, we also have a couple of Disney specials coming up. So we all are big fans of the animation, or the Imagineering story, right? That was like almost 2 years ago now, right? It was like around Thanksgiving time, 2019.
Has
That
Disney
was that.
Plus been out that long?
Yeah, is that crazy?
Wow.
I mean, it was all out all 2020, right? It
Hmm.
was, and this launch with Disney Plus. It was the docu series about the Imagineers and the building of the many theme parks in general. It seems like they're following up that right now with a series. I think it might be a. I'm not sure if it's a one-off or it's a series. I think they're calling it a series called Behind the Attraction. And this is interviews and behind the scenes footage of the rides themselves. Now,
Yes.
let's get this out of the way. Just like the Imagineering story was, on the one hand, a great retrospective and archival look into the history of Disney, it was also, on the other hand, a big commercial for Disney parks. Like, you couldn't watch that as a Disney fan and not want to go to the parks or be sold on maybe their cruise lines at that time.
Dude, what are
circa
you saying? Like, you're
2019.
not going to watch He-Man and Transformers because they're commercials for the toys? You're
Oh,
going to watch them?
I I can separate my willingness to buy into that commercialism versus just acknowledgement of what this is, because it does shape like what they're willing to tell. This is not a third party going in and interviewing, the attraction rides and looking at maybe how Disney rides compare to Universal rides. So we have to acknowledge, as fans of theme parks, of like all the advancements and achievements over at the Universal parks. But this looks like you're going to get some nice behind the scenes look at what happens and how a ride operates, with interviews from a lot of those same Imagineers that were in the Imagineering story. And it, timing wise, as the parks are opening back up, feels ripe, especially for you, Jeremy, timing wise, as you are embarking soon.
You are something else when it comes to segues, Norm. I am going to Disneyland next week. I will not be on the podcast unless you want to call me. I'll be on Space Mountain, and I can do a live telecast.
We did that before.
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
You weren't you at Disney World?
I was at Walt Disney World. I was at Epcot and did a FaceTime check-in. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll see if the timing works out. What are you looking forward to? This is
Oh
Yeah, is
man,
this a Star Wars run for you? Or
I've never even been there. Right, I've never been to Galaxy's Edge because I haven't been to Disneyland in that long, which is at least 2 years. And I'm looking most forward to seeing Rise of the Resistance. For the last year and a half, I have avoided every YouTube video I've come across. So I have no idea what to expect, other than it's supposed to be a long experience that a lot of people are saying is their favorite ride in all of Disneyland, both parks. So I'm super excited about it. My kids are even more excited. Like, they're Disney kids, for better or for worse. That's how we've raised them, and they haven't been in what seems like forever. So we are popping in the new car, and we're going to drive down this weekend, and we'll go there for 3 days, see both parks, and hopefully have a good time. I'm not sure if they're still doing limited capacity. I don't think that they are. And I don't think it's limited to just California residents anymore. I think that's long over. But I do know that they're still advising masks inside. I don't know what kind of social distancing to expect outside. I know they're not doing Fast Pass yet. Anyway, I've done my little bit of research, but I would love any advice from anybody who's been there in the past week or two, for like specifically right now. What are some good tips for visiting Disneyland? And I'm wide open to those on Twitter at Jerware. I'd appreciate them. Thank you.
And while Jeremy will not ask for it, I will ask on his behalf. If there's someone who works at Disney who wants to get Jeremy and his family special line access, or just
no.
anything,
Whoa.
reach out to Jeremy and make his Disneyland experience memorable, even if it's just a pin. right?
Ah,
Get him one of those
take a
pins,
pin.
right? Yeah, coming back after a year away. I think the best advice that I think you should seek is how to book the the Rise of the Resistance
And
ride.
the new Spider-Man. Those are the 2
And yes, that's
that
right.
do
The
the
Avengers
reservations.
Campus. That's
I
right.
I
Yeah.
understand that you do it from your app, and the times are 7 a.m. and noon. So there's
Hmm.
2 little things, and I guess they've been doing record numbers at Rise of the Resistance, so
That's
that's fingers
300
crossed.
boarding groups per day.
Exactly.
And each boarding group is dozen people or something. So they're getting through a good amount. But are you gonna try? How many days are you there for? How many days will you have? 3 days.
3
Okay.
days. And
Well,
then
yeah.
because Kishore honestly, like, I think because Kishore so emphatically said he would be more interested in going to Harry Potter Land than even Disneyland, we're driving north and we're stopping at Universal for a day. So we're gonna
Oh
Nice.
no.
I've
I
never
may
seen
have I may rue the day. We're big Harry Potter fans, and so it was always like the environment of that land is magical. And the last time I went to Universal to Harry Potter Land was pre all this Star Wars stuff at
Mm.
Disneyland.
Yeah. Yeah, oh,
I
yeah, and Marvel. But my kids are huge Harry Potter fans now. Like my 11-year-old has now read 2 of the books. She's making her way through the rest. She's seen all the movies, and my 14-year-old basically grew up on Harry Potter. So I think they're going to enjoy that even more than Star Wars or Marvel. Honestly, I expect to be purchasing wands in my near future.
Oh my gosh! Just make sure you can get in the line so that they can have the wand select them. That's how it
Does
works,
that
right?
happen? Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. We talked about this,
you
right?
go to
There's a
Ollivanders.
special
Just go.
line. You got to go in the alleyway. There's little groups. I don't know how this operates in the new world of theme parks and COVID, but it's the back room of the gift shop where you buy your wand, and there's a whole presentation where magic happens, and one lucky child will be selected by the wand. You don't get to keep it for free, but they take the child whose parents look the most gullible, who looks like you can't say no, and make sure they lock in that sale.
Wow.
I will prepare you to say that Star Wars is not a representation of any place you've seen, right? Because it's Black Spire Outpost in Galaxy's Edge on Batu, which is not a place you've seen in the films. Whereas in Harry Potter, A Wizard and Worlds, it is Diagon Alley. It is right
Gotcha.
from the movies. So that's like mentally, the kids might be more excited to see a place that they've seen on screen before, right? And get their butterbeer.
Because
They've made
kids
all their money
today
back.
lack imagination, and
I mean,
they need to be grounded in what they've already seen. It's true.
it's unfortunately true. Yeah.
Hey, can I bring it back to Disney Plus real quick?
Sure, sure.
We've never talked about the Bad Batch, and we were called out on YouTube comments for not having even mentioned it yet. It's a new Star
Yeah.
Wars episodic thing on Disney Plus.
Yes.
I haven't watched it. I'm curious. Have you guys heard anything about it? Is it worth watching?
I haven't finished the season. I watched it over our vacation with a bunch of my nieces and nephews. It's one of those shows, like, it is helpful to have watched like Clone Wars and some of the other animated series leading up to it because you have some background on the characters. It's really enjoyable. It's a little goofy, but that's like kind of the oeuvre of a lot of those Star Wars cartoons. And it's actually it's pretty good.
Okay, it sounds kind of like what I would have thought about Lost or Lower Decks, or is it more goofy than I expected?
I still haven't seen
I
Lower
it's
Decks.
not
Sorry,
as I
Norm.
don't think it's that type of goofy. I think it's still
No.
serious in like it matters if you care about Clone Wars, and that's the reason I want to watch Clone Wars first.
Gotcha.
It's it's the Dave Filoni part of the Star Wars universe, uh, and it has aloof clones, right? They all have unique personalities, so it's building out memorable characters who all look like variations of each other, kind of,
Hmm.
but vastly different personalities. But yeah, I just unfortunately haven't watched it. It's that part of the Star Wars universe that I will maybe watch with my kid at some point. Right. Speaking of Star Wars, we all saw the single episode, like the making of the season 2 of The Mandalorian, where they interviewed Robert Rodriguez and talked about all the things they did for season 2. And one big notable exception was they never addressed the big finale, the big spoiler surprise, I guess we could say, in the finale. And if you haven't seen Mandalorian season 2, we will be talking with spoilers for the next couple minutes. But Disney has announced that there is going to be a follow up special on Disney Plus just to talk about that surprise reveal in the Mando season 2 finale. And here it goes. That's a spoiler. It's going to be all about Luke's appearance, how they did it technically, their collaboration with Mark Hamill, the storytelling aspects of it, and they're devoting an entire special because there's been so much speculation. I mean, it's been revealed who the body actor was and how they talked about how they did it, but effects artists and fans have kind of have formed lots of opinions, I guess we could say, about that appearance, and they're going to address all of that in this nice retrospective special.
Do you know what my biggest question is? How do they keep it a secret? Because we've talked about that. Like, did the actors who were on set, did they know? Were they playing against some Jedi that they thought was a generic special person in the galaxy, or did they know that it was going to be Mark Hamill superimposed on this guy? I mean,
I think they
because
knew.
you think so? Because
Yeah.
it's an incredible feat of secrecy in this day and age, where even Apple can't even manage to do that anymore.
I think it's NDAs to own your life
Yeah.
and people who love the project. And I'm sure, the brain trust there, like maybe on that filming day, it was only select crew and
Mm.
select things. And, timing wise, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be surprised. I'm happy that there are things that in this spoiler age are not spoiled. And some people seek out the spoilers, but it's tough that you go on Twitter and you see the trending mentions and names of things pop up, and you can't tell if that's a theory, a conspiracy, or a spoiler when
Right.
when there's a trending word that the algorithm just picks up. So I'll be looking forward to that. I think all of that debuts later this month, as well as, of course, Jungle Cruise, which, yeah, I guess we'll check out. Now, before we talk about Black Widow, that's our other big story. This is also kind of Disney Plus related. The director of WandaVision, Matt Shakman. So both WandaVision and WandaVision was written by who is it? Jack Schaefer, and directed by Max Shackman. I think all of the Falcon Winter Soldier was directed by a one woman director, and with a writing team. But the way they've been doing these, and same with Loki. Loki's been directed by Kate Herron, I think, is the director who's directed all the episodes. It's not like a standard TV series where they have different directors come in. They have one director with one vision, working with the writers and the production team to do these series. The juggling of all that has been so impressive, especially on the WandaVision side, which has been nominated for many Emmys at this point. Max Shackman is now picked up to direct the next Star Trek film by Paramount. Now, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when there's a Star Trek film, when I see it in theaters or on Paramount Plus or whatever, because this next Star Trek film has had multiple starts and stops, from the Tarantino supposedly directed one that they had written a script for. There was a previously a director that we talked about that had been picked up. The first woman director of a Star Trek film. But now Paramount apparently is very excited to fast track this, according to Deadline, and get into production early next year. And presumably, this would still be the J.J. Abrams Kelvin universe with Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, produced by Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot.
Right on. Hey, you mentioned the Emmys. Did you see which Emmy Falcon and Winter Soldier got nominated for?
Yeah. Don Cheadle. There are special rules, I believe, about this is best guest appearance
Yeah.
from an actor, right? It's not like best supporting actor. So, like, if you exceed the amount of screen time, then you no longer qualify.
90 seconds.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. No, that's that's as long as Don Cheadle was on screen.
Okay, so I don't know what the cutoff is, but we had assumed that it was going to be, if it was for that show, it would be Carl Lumley but I guess he was on for too many episodes. And if he was on for too many episodes, and I would say on for not enough episodes, not
Right.
enough screen time, if he wasn't going to qualify for best guest actor.
Even
But I
Don
guess
Cheadle tweeted like, "Hey, I have no idea." He said to all the haters, "I'm sorry." To all the like whatevers, like, what happened, guys? Yeah, I'm with you. I have no idea
Yeah.
what this is about.
So, yeah, I mean, they're just kind of notching him Emmys. I don't know if he's going to be if he's in contention really to win that one. The big the big award that a lot of fans have eyes on is best lead actress in dramatic role. So whether it's going to be For WandaVision, Elizabeth Olsen, or Anna Taylor Joy for Queen's Gambit, which is another big fan favorite in shared fan communities. So I would be happy with either of those women won, or any of the other nominees. To be honest, it's a pretty good list this year. Um, all right, so Black Widow. Now, before we talk about the film, and I think it's going to be fair to talk some spoilers about the film at some point. I can whip out the spoiler light. Disney announced some numbers. They announced that Black Widow in theaters in the US made like $80 million. They announced that internationally on Disney Plus Premier Access, it made $60 million, which is a big number, right? This is $30. This is 2 million households paying to watch it on the opening weekend. And it also made some money internationally. So cumulatively, it made like over 200 million in what they consider box office receipts. Now, this is gross. It doesn't factor in the distribution between theater chains and Disney distributors and Disney, as well as the Apple cut. Right, if you're watching it on the Apple TV app, Apple's going to get their 30%, their $10 from that. So I think it was surprising. I think they had to announce these numbers because I think 80 million, while it was record breaking for COVID times, is still low compared to what they would have expected if this had come out, a year ago with max capacity. But what do you guys think this means for the Disney Premier distribution strategy?
I so I'm mixed about this because I really enjoyed the theater experience in my home. The popcorn was better and cheaper. Um, though honestly, there was a lot more talking during the film than I would have experienced in the movie theater.
I don't
But
know.
that
I think you've romanticized the movie theater experience if that's the case.
No, my wife talked way she started asking questions from like moment one, and I we had
You
some
should go. You should go.
discussion.
Shh. Think of the other viewers. Think of the other
Uh,
patrons.
but I I don't want to make this the regular thing because I have like friends that actually saw it in the theater and they like talked about how exciting it was to see a movie with a crowd.
Mm.
And so I don't think Disney is going to cannibalize the movie theater gross on like really big films. So like these Marvel films, I don't think this is going to become the regular thing for them going forward. But man, is there a middle ground where maybe like 2 weeks after release you could get
Mm,
it at home
yeah,
for like, $20 or something like that? I kind of see that's where this is going to end up.
yeah. I like the time delay option. One of the 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 big just changes in the way I watch movies, like outside even like going to a place, is normally in the old days, you go to a movie, you watch it once, the movie kind of exists almost in your head. Like I rarely can remember every single piece of dialogue. I have this kind of sense of how I felt in that movie, and it's a lot of fun kind of remembering. Oh wow, what was that thing that I really enjoyed in that scene, or that action scene was really cool, and then maybe you wait a week or something and you go to the theater and you watch it with a new group of friends and you get to relive that. And there's some enjoyment in that, letting it kind of percolate. Incomplete memory. It's just like a feeling of that. With Black Widow, I was able to watch it, and literally after watching it, I was like, "Oh, I want to see that action scene again," and scroll back and just play the 5 minutes of that action scene. And while that's instant gratification, and that's absolutely, I'm not saying we shouldn't have that option. I think the choice is fine, and this is giving more power to the consumer. It took away from my ability to have that experience, and that is experience that might just by nature go away because we can pull things up on demand anytime. I mean, it's the same with TV shows, right? With TiVo, and but for movies, it was this thing that was part of the movie going experience, and that's why I think it's not the first week numbers that will matter. It's the second week numbers. What is that fall off going to be? Are there going to be repeat viewings, or did that Disney Premiere Access 2 million household number, was that essentially what would have been the second week numbers for people who couldn't watch it opening weekend, but because they couldn't make the time, but found the time to watch it at home?
I found that watching the movie that some of the special effects didn't land for me. And I thought maybe that was because I was either a watching it at home and it wasn't larger than life, and I could like analyze it a little bit better, or maybe they spent less money on it because they knew it was a COVID development and they anticipated lower returns. I don't know, but I just looked up the budget and it's $200 million. At least that's the published budget, which is that's is a very typical. That's a very spot on typical Marvel budget. So according to what they've published, they didn't cheap out on the budget for the special effects, but that is one compelling reason for me to go back to a theater is just to have that sensory overload experience again, where the picture is just massive. I have a huge TV. It's a 70-inch, I think, and it's just like I can't imagine getting anything better in my house. The sound is great, but still, like watching this, it just felt different. It does. I agree with you guys, and of course, watching it with other people has its pros and cons. And when it's positive, it's absolutely better than watching movies at home.
And this is a crowd pleaser. There are moments of this film written and played for a collective laugh and a collective, catharsis. And to watch it just with your family, like it's there are chuckles here and there, but I don't think it lands as much. You don't get that audience feedback.
Yeah.
But shall we talk about the film itself? Like maybe spoiler free first. What do you guys think of the first full length Marvel film since since Spider-Man Far From Home, right? And in the wake of now 3 Marvel TV shows.
And it's the first movie in Phase 4, so it's serving as a kickoff to what is ostensibly sort of a brand new universe post Blip. I thought it was okay. Like, I first of all, I'll say, I think the movie's mistitled. This is more about, uh, Natasha and Yelena together than it is about Natasha herself. Like, she's, I guess, the main star, but she's not the one. Even though she undergoes a character arc, I found actually Florence Pugh's character, or Florence Pew Pew, as people are saying on Twitter. Um, uh, I found her more compelling and a better watch. This is sort of like I think my take would be like this was an enjoyable, quirky, dysfunctional family comedy with some action scenes and an underdeveloped plot. I mean, that'd be my quick review of it.
Uh,
I really liked Florence Pugh. Hope to see her a lot more. David Harbour was overacting as much as he possibly
Hilarious.
could. Rachel Weisz was a little underutilized. I felt like Scarlett Johansson was fine. She kind of um, played a more subtle version of this character. I thought her performance in Endgame was much more affecting and much more powerful than in this movie. But it was an honest transformation that made sense with the Natasha we see in Infinity War.
uh,
Yes, and the non-spoiler thing, like the thing you should know, this is a flashback essentially. This movie takes place after Civil War and before Infinity War, filling in the gap of where Natasha was after basically betraying Tony Stark in Civil War and being on the run, being hunted by General Ross. And I want to say first off, I think the breakout stars of this were absolutely Florence Pugh and David Harbour, and David Harbour overacting. I would be so disappointed if Will Smith does not do a Red Guardian cosplay at some point while he has his beard, because that's all I could think about when I got David Harbour there. All you guys do is like Sharpie in Karl Marx on his knuckles, and he's halfway there. Uh, this tonally, I like the first half of the film so much more than the second half. The first half was more spy thriller. It had a lot of Born Identity, Mission Impossible, even, and James Bond tones to it. The stuff in Norway, the stuff in Budapest was, I thought, really thrilling. But when it got to needing to be crazy Marvel explosions and a crazy finale toward the end, I found that a little bit numbing.
It's hard not to go into spoilers, but I agree with you, Florence Pugh. Huge thumbs up. I loved her in Little Women, and I was excited to see she was in this. Um, I am definitely compelled by her character, and I think we will see more of her, judging by this movie. Um, I wanted more of that Mission Impossible stuff from Natasha Romanoff. Like for me, is it Avengers where she is being interrogated and she gets the phone call and she's
Yeah.
like, I got him right where I want him.
Yep.
Like that's where she's at her best. That's where her character is at her best because she doesn't have superpowers, but she is sure her intellect is her superpower. Her power of coercing her whoever she's talking to and making them feel how she wants them to. I wanted more of that, and we got some of that towards the end, but I didn't feel like that was enough. I felt like it
Mm.
was all more in service of the setup, and I don't know. It wasn't the best movie for me. I'll be curious to see how this ranks for people on the Marvel. What is it? 31 now? Who knows how many movies there are?
Uh, Question. Well, I'll also say the Taskmaster. I mean, we're in spoilers right now. The Taskmaster reveal at the end was fell flat for me. It fell flat for who they cast. It fell flat for how it resonated with the story. It felt like a shoe-in plot development. I would have been happy for it to completely for them to go in a completely different direction if they were going to use that character.
Yeah, it was expected by the time we got to that point. And it just didn't utilize that villain well. The villain had an awesome appearance at the beginning. The first fight between
Oh my god, the
Taskmaster
bridge fight was
and
great.
Scarlet, the that was incredible, and but then was just completely underutilized. Just kind of almost came in as a almost like a MacGuffin at points. It would just randomly appear and just it made no sense. I also thought the entire arc of the Black Widows, like all of the other
Mm,
widows, was very underdeveloped. I don't think we got the sense of real evil that they were being utilized for in the world. So then when their redemption comes, it doesn't land in the same way.
yeah.
You know, and we immediately get dropped into this sort of like miracle cure for their reconditioning. And all of that kind of just landed flat. We needed a little bit more of a build towards that. That being said, when they were just sitting around the kitchen table and the four of them were talking, and it worked for me as a family drama.
Yeah.
Well, that was the trailer. Like, I think that they knew that that was a good scene because that was a huge part of one of the trailers. But what I gathered from those trailers is be ready for bad Russian accents, and I'm glad that I had that prep because
Yeah.
my God,
Figured.
I would have preferred Hunt for Red October style, zoom in on the lips and remove the accent for the rest of the film. Just let people
Yeah.
speak with an English American accent, their natural speaking accents, because it was downright distracting sometimes for me.
I also love the opening of it, that cold open Ohio scene. That was very much a big budget version of the Americans, the kind of sleeper cell, and I wish they had more of that. Right, in the kind of Cold War or modern Cold War spy thriller aspect, it did get very explodey and literally battle fights in the sky toward the end. That like it felt tonally like two movies, or like they needed to check that box. It did open a lot of doors for appearances later. So not only there is an end credit scene that I won't talk about, but characters come back. But also, like you said, the Black Widows, right? All those characters, they lay out this wide net of a global a conspiracy or a global plot, and that has to be addressed somehow. So is that going to be through the TV show? Or these characters, are they going to kind of like what you saw with like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier at the end of that? They kind of buttoned up and tied some loose ends up with an explosion, right? But how are they going to address those agents out there now? When I guess you watch these with your families, but for if you had a family or you had kids coming up, like I do, who will eventually watch these Marvel films, do you show them this movie? Do I show them this movie after Endgame, or do I show it like the Star Wars new different order? Do I show it between Civil War and Infinity War and not have the end credit scene?
In my experience, kids, even as old as my 14-year-old, are sometimes confused by nonlinear storytelling. And so I would go in order of timeline.
But you can't do that for all the Marvel films because Marvel films do jump around in time, and some stuff are period pieces. But this one specifically is a flashback. The whole movie fits very neatly between Civil Wars. So you think,
I'm not a big fan of the chronological film viewing because, like, you have to start the MCU with Iron Man. That sets the tone for the MCU.
sure, sure,
So, like,
sure,
starting with like Captain America: First Avenger because it came first is not does not make sense. And there's more than the post credit scene that hint at that foreshadow what's ahead for her in this movie. So I think it's sort of I I would wait till after, honestly, because do you did we need this to enjoy Endgame and Infinity
did we
War?
lose? Did
I
we
don't
lose
think
Kishore?
so.
No, he's
Oh
still
I
no,
think it
thinking.
really
He's
adds
still
something
thinking.
to those movies.
we lost you for a second there. Sorry, sure, you were
Oh,
frozen in deep thought.
oh,
But yeah, I think your point was taken that you think there's a storytelling purpose to showing them in the order that they were produced and written, even. Yeah. Um, all right. Our last topic, then, also the big news in the world of science and space. We had, as of the recording here, one billionaire has made their way into space by developing his own company and getting up there. Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic reached 50 miles up, so right past the edge of space, what I guess NASA deems as space, as a part of a space tourism play. And Jeff Bezos will be doing that soon enough. Um, my takeaway for this, and I want to hear your thoughts, but I think first of all, I think we can separate. I think it's absolutely possible to have a conversation about this and separate the engineering and technological achievement of a private company being able to produce a sustained rocket flight and repeatable rocket flight to send humans to space, and also the economics and the things that allowed that to happen and the reasons it's happening.
well, yeah. Let's separate those two for a second because this wasn't a flight that just sort of happened. There's a long sort of tale of history here. And if you're actually able to trace it back just in sort of recent times, when Peter Diamandis did the X Prize, one of the first X Prizes was for suborbital space flight. And this engineer, Burt Rutan, developed something called Spaceship One that actually won that prize. That has informed the design of the Virgin Galactic ship that you saw, like directly informed it. And that was not a history that was smooth sailing. There were some accidents on the ground with Spaceship One that cost three people their lives. There was a pilot that lost his life in flight. This is there, but there's like a history here of getting beyond that line, which is usually called the von Karman line, the line between a space and the Earth's atmosphere that's sort of arbitrarily defined. NASA has it defined as 80 kilometers. I think the von Karman line is technically 100 kilometers, whatever. um but this spaceship, that initial design from an X Prize, was a ship that could essentially do what we saw this weekend, which is fly upwards to the upper atmosphere, drop a ship, use a jet to go suborbital, and then glide back to Earth, and then finally just land on a runway. And so it's been 20, 30 years of iterative designs on this ship is what we sort of saw come to fruition yesterday. And so from that side, from the engineering side, all of the work that went into it, the monumental achievement of being able to do suborbital flight and land, um, I think that's a tremendous win. And the acceleration curve that we're seeing in terms of more people being able to do this is also important. I would say, like, Virgin Galactic's mission here is much less ambitious than some of the other agencies. I think, like, Bezos is trying to do this so that we can move some operations that are normally tied to the Earth, like asteroid mining, up into space. So if we find an easier way to get people into suborbital flight than flying a full-on like astronaut mission to the ISS, well, this can make a huge difference. And the form that that takes right now is this sort of space tourism aspect to fund it. And that's a little distasteful, but I want to acknowledge that it's a huge engineering achievement, first and foremost. And this is sort of the culmination of that.
And I think the distasteful part of it is where maybe the accolades go and where the recognition goes, because so much of the story about this is framed as space race between two individuals, which this is certainly not. And this is about a longer plan and the companies and having a sustainable business to make it a to develop all the technology to make it useful. Um, but right now, it is who's there first.
Yeah, and I'll just also give that this idea of like rich people wanting to go to space is also not new. Do you guys remember what's his name? The Ultima guy,
Yeah,
Richard
yes,
Garriott.
Richard Garriott, of course.
Uh,
Yes,
he
Lord
paid
English.
Russia, I think it was like almost $1 million for a ride on the Soyuz that didn't come to reality because he wanted to be like one of the first people to essentially a non-astronaut to like buy your way into space. And there's been like a history of like a bunch of people trying to buy their way into space. And I think um, I think we'll speak to the distaste in a second. Richard Branson put like a huge amount of money and a huge amount of his time and fortune on the line to achieve what we just saw. Like, there's no business case for what he just did.
Hmm.
Uh, and and he's been working at it for like 15, 20 years. And so I think that sort of the discipline it takes, the investment it takes, the smart choices, the kind of the risk involved should be celebrated to a certain extent. Now we
Lo-
can get to the distaste part.
no, hold up though. I just want to clarify. Lord British did in fact go to the ISS. He spent
Yes,
days
Oh,
up
Lord
there.
British. Sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
No,
right.
no.
He did
Yeah,
get on the
he
Soyuz.
did.
That's right.
Yes. No,
Yeah,
it was Lance Bass who was unable to do it.
That's-
this was in 2008. This was
Yeah.
a while ago. And like to me, like if I watch the video of Richard Branson up there and his spaceship, it's a short flight. And I can't help but wonder, like after all of that, is that 5 minutes of weightlessness or whatever he gets? Is that really like is that are you fulfilled by that? Wouldn't you want more? Like
I
once
think
you're
these
up there?
people at this part of their lives where they are billionaires, right? And it's worth talking about, like how did this wealth get accumulated, right? Like I think the things that they care about are things like flag planting and legacy
Yeah.
and having their name in a record book, being the first to do this, because they all want to be Neil Armstrong, but
Mm.
they feel like they have earned the right to do so because they've built businesses um, through our system of economics.
So I think there's two things. I think you have to start somewhere. You don't start at, a day in space. You start at 5 minutes because it's the beginning and you extend from there. So I would not expect that 5 years from now we're still talking about a ride to space that lasts 5 minutes long. I think this is like the beginning of that arc for longer journeys. It feels very unsatisfying because we've actually been to space with real astronauts and done real things up there. But those missions are few and far between. I think what's more interesting than the time they spend in space is the frequency. How often can they get flights up there on a regular basis? Is this a thing that can become, we're going to launch like a flight a week to go up there? And like, because all of that takes a lot of supply chain, it takes a lot of logistics, it takes just sort of a lot in terms of aircraft maintenance to make that happen. And once you can start to do that, it opens up other possibilities in what you can do in that suborbital region. It is not impressive that they got weightless for 5 minutes. We can take the Vomit Comet for $5,000 and get weightless for 90 seconds.
Yeah.
It is about the arc, the trajectory that they're going on. we are on like a rapid curve with this. So does this moment serve as an inflection point where we continue that exponential rise, or do we flatten out from here? That's kind of how I see it. I
I think there's
still think
also
there's something distasteful though about it.
and I think if you go back to Richard Garriott and Lord British and what he did, I think there is a difference between the way he paid his way, which he certainly did, to space, because to have that seat on the Soyuz, he still had to go through the same training, and he had a mission purpose on the ISS. Learn both languages. He had to meet a certain of operational criteria, which is very different than the promise that Virgin Galactic has, which is if you have $10,000 deposit and $250,000 to pay, you could have that marker as having been to space. Because we, as a culture, we have held astronauts and cosmonauts in very high regard, to saying these are the best of the best. Right? NASA selects these people, subset of a subset of a subset, because of finite resources and because it requires amount of technical know-how and physical aptitude to be able to make it. And I think a lot of these, the billionaires and maybe the people who have booked these seats want to be in that strata, right? Figuratively, uh, just with dollars and not necessarily with having to go through all the rigor of the program.
Yes. So
In
which of
agreement.
which of us will be the first to space?
I'm happy. I'm happy. If it was like, here's $250,000, either go to space or maybe see the world. Seeing the world, right?
Yeah.
There's so much here to see that I haven't seen. That I would rather, far, far rather do that than to have the 5 minutes at the edge of space, or 50 miles up, or whatever it is.
I
Uh,
suspect my first time playing Lone Echo will be the scratching of the itch for the rest of my life. Like
Yeah.
the closest I will ever get to feeling weightless.
And guess what? There's zero risk there. The biggest risk you have is breaking your big screen TV by throwing a touch controller. Here we're also talking about the thing that's not said is, as space is inhospitable. Our bodies are not made for to be in outer space, and so much of us and our egos want to travel the stars, but as we've read in science fiction, as writers and as futurists and as scientists have talked about, it's very unlikely that we are going to have humanity as we understand it, a person living to 100 or so odd years, is going to travel the galaxy, let alone the solar system. In our lifetimes, it's going to be robots. It's going to be sending other uh, s- colonizing other ways, like it's not necessarily going to be the way we imagine in science fiction.
Yeah, so I don't deny the ego here that you're both referring to and how unsatisfying it is. I will say the thing that irks me about this is the language that is being used by these billionaires around it. Is they're talking about the great democratization of space, and it is literally the opposite of that. It is democratization in name only. This is the oligarchy of space at this point, because it is definitively going to be only a few set of people that are going to be able to go in the near term. Now, the long term vision could definitely be a more democratization of space. And I agree with the approach, because like it does open up new avenues to space exploration that and I hesitate to even use the term exploration, but space utilization in and around Earth, that we saw with the development of tiny, sat cubes and everything else like that. So I'm excited about the potential, but we like the language calling people astronauts after this little flight and calling it democratization of space, I think devalues the achievements that have come before, and also sets up a incorrect perception of what's to come. We're only going to see a slight few people use this. They're definitely going to be well off to do. There's going to be many ego strokes on the way, but I agree with the arc of the engineering and science achievement of what it potentially brings 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And I just wish it was a little less bombastic because it sets the incorrect expectations. And call me idealistic, I still see space as everyone's territory. It is not a place to be owned and operated. And these people going up don't feel the same, I don't think.
And it's a place to be understood and to be explored. It's just that we may need to realign what we understand that exploration to be. Like right now, we have robots on Mars, and they're opening our eyes to all sorts of amazing things. Uh, I feel like there's so much room for that type of exploration, before we get to getting a person there. And once we do, what it then is the end goal. The colony on Mars idea is there's so many reasons for it not to be feasible. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Kishore, about the democratization of space. But don't worry. We'll have a coupon day or something.
I got to jet,
all right.
guys.
That's it for the podcast this week. We'll be back next week to talk about Loki finale, probably. But have a good time at Disneyland, Jeremy. And we'll hear the full report when you get back. But in the meantime, here is an outro we'll play. It's like always, an oldie, but a goodie.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Norm and I shared that moment together. We're like, oh no, people listen to this.
Yeah, and I want to apologize to you out there who are listening.
I'm never apologizing
Never
for the
apologizing.
mayor.
Okay.
Never
Just keep on
apologizing for the
listening.
mayor.
What's the context here, guys?
We were just on a conference call and like somebody's like, yeah, I listened to your show.
I'm like, oh, you listen to Still Entitled, right? No, listen to This Only a Test. What? Huh?
No.
Huh?
That's always a good one. All right. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.